Dear learners, welcome to this MOOC course on skill development of the youths and their livelihood. Today we are going to discuss the Module 4 of this MOOC course titled Youth and Livelihood Opportunities in India. In this module, we shall be discussing about youth as a social category. We'll be describing the employment scenario in India. We'll be explaining different livelihood constraints and challenges facing the Indian youths. We'll be discussing the importance of skills for the youths, and we'll discuss some of the emerging areas in which the youths of India can fetch themselves a sustainable livelihood. So dear learners, in the previous module, we have discussed about the different sectors in which people of India are engaged to earn themselves a living. We have talked about the different sectors of the Indian economy where people are engaged or people are employed. In this module, we'll be basically focusing on youth and the livelihood opportunities that exist for them in our country. So let us first begin this module with a discussion on the youths. Let us conceptualize the category called youth. There has been no unanimous or universally agreed definition on youth. The United Nations defines youth as those persons falling between the age group of 15 to 24. Now the United Nations Secretariat, they use the term youth interchangeably to mean the people belonging to age group between 15 to 24, while they understand with an understanding that the member states of United Nations and other entities, they have different definitions of their own. According to the World Youth Report 2018, there are around 1.2 billion young population across the globe falling between the age group of 15 to 24 years, and they account to around 16% of the total global population. When we talk about youth, they fall between a certain age group, but youth as a category is not socially homogeneous. The social category of youth comprises of individuals belonging to different class, caste, gender, community, region, cultures, so on and so forth. So there are huge, variations within the social category of youth. It's highly a diverse group. Though they fall within an age bracket, within a specified age bracket of 15 to 24 years, yet there exists a huge diversity in terms of class, community, culture, so on and so forth. And this understanding of intersectionality of youth is very important for us, and because only then we'll be able to comprehend why a section of the youth have better access to education, to modern education, to training, to digital skills. They have better access to social networks, social capital, and why they are better placed, while some others, more disadvantaged, do not have that exposure and access, do not have much human capital and social capital, and remain deprived or disadvantaged. Okay, so this understanding of the intersectionality among youth is very important, because that gives us an idea of why some youth, a section of the youths, are better placed than the others. Why certain sections of the youth have better access to modern education system, to skills, and why others don't. Now coming to youth employment and livelihood. Youth unemployment and underemployment has been an issue of serious concern across the globe, and more particularly for the developing countries like India. In countries like India and other developing countries, a huge segment of population comprises of the youths. But the employment structure in India and other developing countries are mostly skewed in nature, with very less jobs in the formal and the organized sector. And therefore, a huge segment of the Indian population, including the youth, today hardly have any option left but to engage themselves in the informal workforce to earn a living. The situation is grave in the context of India, because we have an ever increasing population on one hand and disproportionate employment or job creation on the other. Now, the employment generation is not increasing at par with the increase in population. There's a wide gap between the increase in population and the increase in employment, which results in an unemployment situation, which results in an underemployment situation, and therefore it becomes very challenging for the Indian youths to find themselves a sustainable source of income. Let us now discuss the present unemployment scenario in India in details. As we have mentioned above, India has a budding working population from the age group of 15 to 59 years, which is otherwise considered as a demographic dividend. It has the largest youth population in the world, with around 66% of its total population under the age of 35. According to a study, 2010 population figures, 1 in the 5 young population in the world is an Indian. With the larger section of its population falling under the active and young working age group, Indian population has the ability to serve as a resource, as an asset, making the country economically more productive. But though the youth population has the capability to steer the economic growth of the country, but the present employment scenario in the country depicts a rather gloomy picture. According to a recent study by the Institute of Labour Economics, contrary to the increase in India's working age population, that is 15 to 59 years old, by 9% between 2016 to 2019, growth in employment was only 0.7%. So there has been 9% increase in population falling under the working age group of 15 to 59 years within 2016 to 2019. But in the same years, from 16 to 19, growth in employment was only 0.7%. And the situation has become worse with the pandemic hitting the country and its economy. With the prolonged lockdowns, there has been series of pay cuts, job losses, so on and so forth. And there has been studies which reveals that the employment situation has further deteriorated in 2021 with 32.03% unemployment rate as in August 2021. So, with the pandemic, the situation has worsened. Considering the current employment scenario in India, studies state that nearly every third young person in the country is unemployed. Employment crisis, however, is not confined to India alone. It is a global crisis. According to ILO, International Labour Organization's estimates, approximately 74 million young men and women are unemployed across the globe, which amounts to 41% of the 180 million unemployed people globally. So, youth as a category, they comprise of a huge section of the unemployed population. And this is a global phenomenon. It is a global crisis. Apart from unemployment, a huge segment of the youth and the young population today are engaged, as I have mentioned earlier, in the informal sector. Due to lack of avenues in the formal and the organized sectors, young population are compelled to join the informal labor force. In the informal labor force, they suffer from lower wages, lack of job security, no sense of social security, so on and so forth. So, Indian youths are grappling with problems like unemployment, underemployment, employment in the informal sector without any sense of security, so on and so forth. And this is true for all other developing countries where this section of the young population are surviving in extreme poverty. And here the condition of women is far more worse, far more acute than men. Now let us try to understand why this situation has happened. We have already given a hint that there is a disproportion between the increase in population and employment generation. Let us discuss this in details. Now, India has a population of more than 1 billion, and to cater to the livelihood of such a huge population requires a proportionate employment generation. However, Indian economy has failed to generate livelihood avenues, employment avenues for the entire population. And therefore, a huge section of the population remains unemployed. Now, why has Indian economy failed to generate employment? The answer is that there is a very slow growth in the economy of the country. Though India is considered as one of the fastest growing economies, yet its economic growth is not at par with the growth in population. Its economic growth is staggered, and in the past few years it has tremendously slowed down. The average growth, GDP growth of Indian economy was 8% between 2014 and 2017, but it has significantly declined to 6.5% in 2018 and 19, that is prior to the pandemic. And further, it has declined further in the post-pandemic to 4%. So we have a very staggered economic growth, and this staggered economic growth has failed to generate employment avenues. According to the periodic labor force survey, there was a continuous decline in the labor force participation rate from 63.7% of working age population in 2004 and 5 to 49.8% in 17 and 18. So on one hand, we have a low or slower GDP growth rate. On the other hand, we have a decline in the labor force participation rate. So, Indian economy is grappling with slow economic growth and slower employment generation. However, contrary to this, population is increasing at a faster rate, which is leading to a crisis. Study shows that the growth of population of those aged 25 or above was around 2.5% per year, but rate of employment growth was around 1.5% to 2%. So here there is a gap, and that is why we have this crisis of unemployment. Now, the second cause is the lower rate of professionally qualified people. The percentage of adult literacy is very less in India. Gross enrollment rate in the higher education sector is low. It's from 18 to 23 years. The gross enrollment ratio, according to the All India Survey of Higher Education 2016-17, is only 25.2%. While male is 26.0%, female gross enrollment ratio in higher education is only 24.5% according to the survey. The percentage of gross enrollment ratio for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe are still lower. It comes around 20% and 15% respectively. So we have a very low rate of gross enrollment ratio in the higher education. So majority of our people are undergraduate. Not many among them are enrolled in technical education, and therefore they do not have perhaps the requisite skills and knowledge to get themselves engaged or absorbed in the high-end jobs, in the white-collar jobs. If you see the report of the All India Survey of Higher Education 2016 and 17, you'll find that people, highest number of students in India are enrolled in the undergraduate level with 79.4%, while postgraduate enrollment is only 11%. For PhD, it is only 0.4% of the total students. So, students enrolling themselves in higher education is very, very less compared to the total population. Now, when you talk about the undergraduate level, majority of them, 38% of them are enrolled in the arts and humanities. Science only 16.7%, engineering and technology only 14.7%, and commerce 14.1% of the total population. So we have a very limited number of students enrolling themselves in technical education. So Indian youth population comprises of a very small segment who have professional degrees like engineering, medical, management, so on and so forth. So because we have very less population, going for higher education and technical education, a large segment of the population remains incompetent for high-end white-collar jobs. Further, if we talk about geographical segregation, we see that, people having professional degrees, technical degrees, or enrolling themselves in higher education are mostly from the urban areas. So we have very few people from the rural areas having professional and technical degrees. Hence, the percentage of employment in formal and organized sector for the rural youth is lower in comparison to their urban counterparts. And the situation is more worse again for rural women. We have found basically two important causes. One is that yes, economic growth is slow, therefore there is low employment generation. Secondly, we have only a small section of the population who have professional and technical degrees and are competent for high-end white-collar jobs. Majority of our youth population are enrolled in the undergraduate level. Very few of them only have professional degrees, majority of them don't, and therefore it becomes difficult for them to get absorbed in the government and the service sectors, and therefore, a huge section of them remains unemployed, or they are compelled to engage themselves in informal sectors, so on and so forth. So as we have discussed, young population or young people in the country, they are struggling with acute unemployment and underemployment situation, and we have tried to analyze why this has happened. Now the situation, as we have said, has worsened with the coming of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the prolonged lockdowns have decelerated the Indian economy and, has resulted in pay cuts, job losses and so on. And, a lot of people have lost their jobs, particularly those working in the informal workforce. Now, increasing joblessness, the crisis of employment is not only a livelihood crisis, it is not only an economic crisis, but then it is also accompanied by several other social problems like increasing crimes, violence, drug abuse, tendency to join insurgency, so on and so forth. So, taking this background, we have to understand why skill is important. We have understood that, youths are struggling with unemployment and underemployment crisis. Now, what is the way out, or what is the mechanism to deal with the livelihood challenges facing the Indian youths? From the discussion that we have had in this module, we'll try to contextualize the importance of skill. With lesser employment generation in formal and organized sector, as we have said, the young population have become socio-economically vulnerable. They have joined the casual and the manual workforce. Now, to deal with this livelihood crisis, skilling the Indian youths become very important. According to the McKinsey report, which draws survey data from across 9 countries in the world, the report demonstrates that 43% of the employers indicated that they could not find the right kind of skills they required for the entry-level workers. So, the employers, they do not find people who have those skills and capabilities that is required by the industry or by the manufacturing unit. Therefore, dealing with employment crisis requires job generation on one hand, and parallelly, it also requires skill development of the youths. So, mere job generation or job creation will not be able to solve the problem. We also need to have a parallel skill development program. In the Indian scenario, it has been witnessed that the youth population has joined the labor market at a very early age owing to their poverty. They mostly join as informal and casual workers with low productivity jobs. They usually do not possess the technical skills and training to upgrade themselves and find better jobs. It is therefore very important to train and equip the youths with employable skills in order to improve their employable scenario. Acknowledging the importance of skill for development of the youths, the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship has been created by the Government of India. This ministry would collaborate with all other ministries to promote skill development of the population of the country. Further, the present Prime Minister of India has also launched the National Policy for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship in the year 2015. With a vision to skill its young population, as we have discussed in the previous module, the Government of India has undertaken several employment and entrepreneurship development schemes and initiatives such as the Aspire scheme, the Startup India project, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, so on and so forth. All these schemes and policy interventions are aimed at providing skill-based training to the youths and developing in them entrepreneurial skills and capabilities. Disproportionate population employment ratio, lower economic growth and lesser employment generation, particularly in the organized and the formal sector, have necessitated such policy interventions. Therefore, we can say that it is only through skill development that India can fight the livelihood crisis it is struggling with. The youths of the country, if provided with better quality education, on-job training, skill development, on one hand, and there is productive job generation on the other, through this we can deal with the livelihood crisis and unemployment problem that India is currently facing. For those who are self-employed, there should be mechanisms to support credit and marketing assistance that will help a lot for them to develop their entrepreneurship skills and to go further, to proceed in their entrepreneurial journey. Now coming to the last section of our discussion, that is on youth and sustainable livelihood. We have already understood the backdrop on the employment scenario in India, and we have tried to contextualize the importance of skill for acquiring sustainable livelihood among the youths. So we have understood that the present employment scenario is characterized by abundant labor supply but less of job avenues. The excess of labor supply gives the employers a larger scope of choice. But for the laborers, the market has become very competitive. The labor market has become highly competitive. And in this context, skills become important because people with higher skills are more competent and get absorbed in the job market, while the others who do not have those skills, they lag behind. Therefore, it is very important for the youth population today to understand that yes, we have a livelihood crisis in the country, but with skills, we can compete in the labor market and get employment. We can have a sustainable source of income through the need-based skills. In the present digital era, though we have a crisis of employment, but in the present digital era, there are several emerging livelihood avenues where one can engage himself and fetch a sustainable living. For example, there are newly emerging areas such as e-content creation, where you create online contents. Then there is website development, digital marketing, blogging, so on and so forth. All this requires digital skills. You have to have computer literacy, you have to know how to operate a computer, you have to know digital skills. And if you can acquire those kind of skills, that can provide livelihood avenues. Okay, now digital marketing, e-content creation is of high demand. People are earning their livelihood through these options. So this is one area. Secondly, photography, videography, content editing, event management are also other emerging areas which can be opted for as a source of livelihood. Apart from this, there are ample lot of opportunities to upscale our traditional handloom and handicraft products. there are institutions which provide credit assistance, which provide marketing assistance. We have to have an idea of that, and then with our own local products. There are a lot of examples. There are bamboo crafts, there are jute crafts, there are the potteries. There are a lot of these traditional handloom and handicraft which we can upskill them as per the market demand and effectively market them through digital media. And this way, we can have a sustainable source of income for ourselves, and we can also, on the other hand, contribute to the revamping of the handloom and the handicraft sector. Similarly, traditional food, local delicacy is one area through which youth can generate sustainable livelihood for themselves. Then ecotourism is another way to generate livelihood, or generate sustainable income. For example, the youths belonging to the geographically aesthetic, naturally aesthetic regions, the youths can come together from a particular village. If it is very naturally aesthetic, it's beautiful, they can come together and promote ecotourism. They can set up a small resort, then they can showcase their traditional art forms, dance, music to the guests, and that way they can very well develop an ecotourism and generate sustainable income from there. All that is required is skill. You have to have digital skills, you have to have marketing skills, you have to have communication skills, you have the digital media through which you can market your products, you can reach out to people, and that way you can find the youths, they can find gainful employment. Only thing is that the youths, they need to be trained in making optimal use of the limited resources that they have, and how through these resources they can generate livelihood opportunities, livelihood avenues for themselves and for the others in the community. Imparting digital skills and the knowledge of newer forms of livelihood, credit sources and marketing is therefore very, very important. And in the coming modules of this course, we shall attempt to provide ideas as to how, through different hard and soft skills, people, particularly the youths, can fetch themselves sustainable livelihood. Thank you.